Hey everybody, I'm Paul from Canadian Woodworks and Legacy Lumber, back at you for another Tool Tuesday. Today we're going to feature you two of our bandsaws. The one we generally use for curve work, cutting out our dining table legs, bar stool legs, rocking chair legs. The other one we generally use for straight cutting or cutting laminations using a power feeder, laminations. So I hope you enjoy the video, hope you learned something. Thanks for tuning in. Now the reason we cut laminations is that our rocker for the rocking chair is bent laminated with 9 layers, 1/8 of an inch thick. And our back braces, you can see the shape here, are also bent laminated with 4 layers, very thin. They're actually flexible in the chair, very comfortable by the way. So that's the reason for cutting so many laminations. I like doing it at the bandsaw because it's very safe. Table saw you can have kickback and it's just a lot more aggressive. But number 2, the kerf is so small that we're going to be matching the grain from the same piece of wood along the fronts of the back braces, and it just keeps that grain match super tight. And you can really get very figured woods, but a lot of the time you're restricted to the thickness. So using the bandsaw, you're able to get a lot of laminations out of just a little bit of wood, maybe even down to 3/4. You can get 8 laminations out of it. All of my chairs start out from a wood pattern, typically made out of plywood. We're going to take this, lay it on the piece of wood, trace it with a pencil, and then I go to the bandsaw. All the curved faces I just cut as best as I can, and we sand those nice and smooth. I usually leave a little bit of meat right by the joint location or wherever there's any straight edges, and I clean that up at either an edge sander or a disc sander. So you get to have a little bit of fun with the bandsaw when you build my chairs, and you're going to be creating a leg like this. You can see the thickness. This one actually already also has a joint cut in it, and this is solid walnut now. All right, so here we are. This is the beast. This is a 32-inch bandsaw. Why do they call it a 32-inch bandsaw? The wheel that the blade actually goes around is 32 inches, which gives you a 32-inch throat. So between here to here, you're able to fit 32 inches of wood, which allows you to really cut very freely with curves. You have a very big table. One of the best things about the bandsaw. As you can see, it's like almost 8.5 feet tall. It's quite something. I was able to get this at an auction, not actually local to me, about 2.5 hours away, 3 hours away in Windsor, Ontario. And that's actually one of my more expensive auction purchases, but I had to have it. I paid $1,100 for it. Still a steal. This was one of my first auction scores when I first started woodworking, and to me at the time, it was quite expensive. $1,100 was quite the purchase. The other thing was this is 3-phase, and I'm actually out in the country on a farm. We don't have 3-phase power here. But I learned all about VFDs or AC drives, which they can take single phase in and then give you 3-phase out on the other side. We have a switch over here. Just looks like a standard light switch, which is wired all the way back to the VFD. This signals the VFD to turn on, and then the bandsaw turns on. Like so. Now, one of the interesting things you can do with a VFD is ramp up the speed as well as apply braking. So when I push the off switch, it actually does help brake the bandsaw blade and slow it down. So this is just like any other bandsaw. You can tension, detension the top wheel to change the blade. You can tilt the wheel a little bit for the tracking, and you have an adjustable fence, which I think this one goes close to 20 inches in height. Although I wouldn't use this one for resawing. I have my other bandsaw, which is more designed as a resaw bandsaw. You might be asking, what kind of bandsaw is this? This big giant green thing. I did a little investigation on a model number on the tag, BU801 bandsaw. You search that, you do a little digging on the internet, and I found out this is a Bulgarian bandsaw from the early 80s. And it was very popular here in Canada because I have seen them around now. In fact, I own a second one right here. Look, collecting a bunch of dust, all sorts of stuff leaning on it, and I would actually like to sell this bandsaw. So if you're local to me, maybe not the smartest to ship it, but I will give you a smoking deal on this bandsaw. It needs a little TLC. It's got a slight vibration. Is it the bearing? Is it just to do with the wheel rubber? I don't exactly know. I just don't have the time to put into it anymore. And they're terrific bandsaws, so get in touch with me if you're interested in it. This was a big splurge for me when I first started out. I got this, I think in my first year, but once I fell in love with the Sam Maloof style furniture, I knew I was going to be spending a lot of time at a bandsaw. And also I wanted to do my laminations using a bandsaw, so I wanted a good quality bandsaw. This is Italian made. This is a Mini Max MM20. Just a beautiful, beautiful machine. This is a 20-inch bandsaw. So we have 20-inch sized wheels and a 20-inch throat. It also has a 20-inch height resaw. So I can very easily crank this all the way up. You can see here, I can resaw a full 20 inches. And you know what? I actually have done that. I don't do it too often. So it has to be built rock solid. This is really thick, super, super strong to be able to tension a blade and have this much throat. Now, very early on, I added a drift master fence. I believe this is from Laguna, and it's very easy to adjust the drift. That way, when you're ripping straight cuts, it aligns with the little bit of shimmy your bandsaw has. Basically, when you cut a piece of wood straight on a bandsaw, you're actually slightly angled with the piece of wood. So the fence needs to be set to that same angle. That's called bandsaw drift. In this situation, we're going to be cutting some laminations with a power feeder. This is one thing I did. I drilled my table. I got holes in the table. Yeah, everyone's like, oh my God, you drilled into your bandsaw. I did drill into my bandsaw. Now, at the time when I did this is many, many, many years ago now, there was virtually no information on the internet about adding a power feeder to your bandsaw. And I just kind of winged it. I got this relatively small one. All right, so we got the power feeder bolted down tight, okay? It's bolted down tight. Typically, I'll use a lamination from previous times. Got a little tester lamination here. The drift master fence is also nice that it can lock in and you can just bring in the width. This fence also slides on here, so you can loosen this, and this. I just gotta bump it back there to avoid the guard. Lock her down. Oops. All right, dust collector's on. Sorry for the noise. This is how I set it up. I take my billet, I push it into the power feeder. Now I only have one wheel mounted on the power feeder. You only need the single wheel. I pull this back, hit my cameraman in the gut. I'm gonna bump it in a little bit more than needed. Lock it down, turn on the feed control, and of course turn on the bandsaw. And now we're gonna be feeding this in. I like to just be here to help it along if it needs and finish off the cut. I'll come over here, and there we go. We got one lamination cut. Beautiful finish. I don't need to joint it. I don't need to sand it. I don't need to do anything to that. I'm going to bring it back to the bandsaw. I'm going to loosen this off, bump this in a little bit, and just fire it through again. It's always done that. So I know I'm going to be asked, what blades do I use on both these bandsaws? On my big bandsaw, when cutting curve work, that's a 3/8 of an inch wide blade, and it's 3 TPI. Just a standard wood blade from a local supplier, R&D Bandsaw, here in Brampton, Ontario. Fantastic pricing, and they're super close. Shipping is super, super cheap also. This one here, I'm using the wood slicer from highlandwoodworking.com. You can go there, order it. So there's our little Tool Tuesday, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great one. Make it a great one. I'm supposed to say make a great one. You guys, you know the drill.